A very good evening to everyone joining us from far and wide. This is Uttam Prakash, your host, welcoming you to the 23rd edition of Non-Stop RGDE, the Reimagining Governance Discourse for Excellence. A warm welcome to all the officers, participants attending the induction training program at PIDUNAS, other dignitaries, and of course, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, the keynote speaker of the day. It's always good to see so many of us logged in from every corner of the country. Today, as I said, we have with us someone who has spent decades thinking about India's economic rise, its institutions, and its long-term aspirations. It is a privilege to host an economist, an institution builder, and one of India's most thoughtful public voices. Shall I say, all at once. This evening feels special because it lets us step back from our daily routines and look at something on a larger horizon. In his new book, Rajiv sir, Everything All at Once, makes a refreshing point. India's future cannot be built by copying what others have done. We have to imagine our own way forward, grounded in our strengths, our values, and our sense of what is right. Before we begin this conversation, may I request our colleagues, Sri Surendra Mohan and Sri Shivendra Pratap Singh, who are present with Dr. Rajiv Kumar sir, to offer a traditional felicitations on behalf of the Academy as well as EPFO. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. And for this affection, truly appreciate your gratefulness, sir, here.
Thank you.
Before I move further, let me say that Rajiv Kumar, sir, also speaks very openly about something we all sense, that the relationship between government and industry needs more trust. No country has succeeded without both rowing together. Sir, here in EPFO, we feel the energy of this moment as well. More scale, more responsibility, and a chance to make social security simpler, meaningful, and more human for crores of citizens who count on us. At this juncture, may I now invite, with great pleasure, Sri Kumar Rohit, Director of the National Academy, for his welcome address, please.
Good evening to all colleagues joining from across the country. It's my privilege to extend a warm welcome to the CPFC Shri Ramesh Krishnamurthy and to our esteemed keynote speaker, Dr. Rajiv Kumar. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to the 23rd edition of Reimagining Governance Discourse for Excellence. When we began this series, the idea was simple: to create a space where officers could step back from the rush of work and think a little more deeply about their ideas behind governance. Today, after 22 uninterrupted sessions, RGD has become a habit of reflection, and its recognition as a special initiative on EPFO's Foundation Day on 1st of November is a reminder that learning is also an act of service. One of the most encouraging things for us at the Academy has been seeing how the ideas from this platform have translated into improvements. From Sanjeev Sanyal, we drew energy for simplifying processes and removing friction in everyday work. From Kailash Satyarthi, we built our Compassion in Governance module, which now forms a part of our training DNA. From Adil Hussain, we learned the power of narrative, how public institutions must communicate trust, not just deliver services. And from others, we have taken lessons on health, resilience, design thinking, and leadership. These sessions have shown that thought can lead to action and reflection can lead to change. That spirit makes today's speaker especially relevant. सौरज धीरज तेहि रथ चाका सत्यशील दृढ़ ध्वजा पताका बल विवेक दम पर हित घोरे क्षमा कृपा समता रजु जोरे. Today at Ayodhya, the Honorable Prime Minister invoked these lines, describe the chariot of development, one powered by valor and strength, but steered by truth and character. While this provides our ethical foundation, we need a strategic roadmap to navigate the complex road ahead. We are honored to have Dr. Rajiv Kumar here to decode that journey. Through the lens of his book, Everything All at Once, he will explain how India can manage simultaneous global transition to successfully achieve the goal of Viksit Bharat 2047. Dr. Rajiv Kumar had spent decades studying how societies grow and how institutions adapt. What stands out in his book is his belief that India's progress will depend not only on policies, but on the mindset with which we confront the complexities. He writes about the ability to learn continuously, collaborate without boundaries, and approach change with confidence rather than hesitation. These are not economic ideas alone. They are qualities that shape good public servants. For us at the Academy, they speak directly to the next generation of training. Rules may evolve, systems may modernize, but officers who build these qualities become ready for the India of 2047. Sir, it is an honor to have you with us. Your perspective on journey to 2047 will help our officers understand not just the future of the country, but the future of their own role within it and how to shape the cause of universal and smart social security for all that the government is pursuing. Thank you and Jai Bharat.
Thank you so much, sir. The academic's perspective always helps set the tone. Thoughtful, forward-looking, and deeply rooted in learning. Our CPFC, the CEO of EPFO, will be joining soon. So while we wait for him, I now proceed further, introducing with great pleasure our keynote speaker, Dr. Rajiv Kumar. Sir, whom we are honored to have him here, has served India in many roles. Former Vice Chairman NITI Aayog, economist with a DPhil from Oxford, Senior Fellow at CPR ORF, former Chief Economist, CII, former Secretary General, FICCI, author of several impactful books, and the most recent one, Everything All at Once. He is one of the rare thinkers who can make structural reform sound both urgent and achievable. In his book, he argues that India cannot wait for perfect sequencing. Growth, reform, institution building, and social cohesion must all move forward. Well, all at once. This morning's editorial in the Hindu made a similar point, though in a different context. It said that major national reforms succeed only when the spirit of dialogue and consultation is alive. It reminded me of something Dr. Kumar has often said, that the strength of a nation rests not only on its policies, but on the relationships that make those policies workable. So today's theme, friends, India at 2047 is exactly where his ideas shine brightest. Sir, we are privileged to hear your vision for the India we want to build over the next 2 decades, and the role institutions like ours will play in that journey. May I request you to take on the floor, please? It's all yours, sir. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Uttam. Great to hear you and be here and amidst all of you. The director of the academy, thank you for your opening remarks, and a great privilege to be with the EPFO community doing such a wonderful job for our country. And I must congratulate you on the reimagining governance discourse, because I'm not sure if I know of any other government or indeed private sector organization which has instituted such a thoughtful initiative, which is where officers are given the opportunity as the director said, to reflect on what's going on and put their own job in the context of the broader, in the broader context of the country's development and the country's social change. So congratulations to you, and once more, a privilege to be addressing you on this 23rd lecture of reimagining governance and discourse challenge. Friends, let me, in the next 35 minutes or so, which I've been given, lay out before you what we have in front of us and what we need to, achieve going forward. We've often heard now the concept of Viksit Bharat, that we have to be Viksit Bharat by 2047, the centenary of our independence in 1947. It's important, however, to define it. What do we mean by Viksit Bharat? And for me, there have been 3 definitions. One is that, before we were colonized formally by the Brits in 1850, our share of the world GDP was about 18%. It was about 28% when Alexander came here, but that's different. But 18% in 1850. So if we want to wipe out the traces of being colonized, the one target for Viksit Bharat could be to regain our share in the world GDP of 18% by the time we are 100 years independent. That could be one target. It's a very ambitious target because that will require us to be an economy of $36 trillion, because the world GDP will be about 200 trillion by 1950. The second target, therefore, can be that we will become, we will also achieve the OECD membership status. OECD permits countries to become its members when their per capita income reaches $20,000. Not many Asian countries have been able to achieve this in the post-war era. Korea is one and Taiwan is the other. And China is racing towards it, but is not yet there. But that again, in my view, can be one target if you want to be aspirational. But one has to look at the viability of that target. The third is to achieve the World Bank definition of a high-income economy, which is pegged at $14,000 per capita. That's the World Bank definition. Below that, you are upper middle income or lower middle income. We are at the moment in the lower middle income status, so that we can jump from lower middle income status to the high income status of achieving $14,000 by 2047 or 2050. Now that sounds achievable, because we are today at about $3,000 per capita, 2,870, something like that in nominal terms. In PPP terms, of course, will be about three times as much. So at $2,000, but our average growth rate since 1991 has been about 6%, 6.3, 6.2%. And at 6%, an economy doubles every 12 years. You double every 12 years. The compound growth rate makes it do that, so that if you are at 3,000 today and you are growing at 6%, then you will be 6,000 by 2037, and you will be 12,000 by 2049. So not good enough to reach the World Bank's high income status. So therefore, it's a clear sign that growing at 6%, which has been our average since 1991, the liberalization period. Prior to that, we were much slower. A decade before that, which is when I grew up, we had 3.1, etc. But see, even so, we have to ramp up our growth rate above 6%. That's one option. The second option is, and this is what I put out in the book as well, is that look, we don't want to play with these numbers, 6, 14, 12, 20, etc. But we want to achieve a society which has the human development indicators which have been achieved by the OECD economies. Why can't we do that? We can give to our people the same standard of living, the same quality of life as the OECD countries have and as Scandinavian countries have. And is that possible at lower per capita income levels? We have to think through that seriously, ladies and gentlemen, because trying to grow more rapidly and achieve 14,000 or 20,000 may well imply the breaching of planetary boundaries. That is, 1.4 billion, 1.6 billion Indians want to achieve, $20,000. We may not have a viable Earth to live in, and because of what's happening on the ecological front. So therefore, can we achieve that level of quality of life below those numbers? And Kerala kind of proves it, doesn't it? That they have the HDI, the Human Development Indicators, in terms of literacy, in terms of nourishment, in terms of quality of life, in terms of stability now, and that women empowerment, female education, etc., which is, as Amartya Sen and John Drez have pointed out, which are pretty much as good as the OECD levels. Can we replicate that across India for all our states? And if so, how? But that the two essential qualities of that, for that, and I've put that forward in my book as something called the gross welfare product, which has the HDI plus, has the growth in per capita income levels of the last decile of our population, and the loss of natural capital. You have to include all of that to get to a really tidy figure of gross welfare product. But can we replicate that? The essential qualities are, the essential critical qualities are: one, the preservation of our climate; two and three, free universal access to high quality free education, free primary education, and free primary health. If you look at any OECD country, now except North America and Europe, you will see that this is what the Scandinavians have achieved. Now that's not an easy proposition, because that, friends, will require a complete change, a complete transformation of our governance and the role of our public sector. Because it is because of that people have adopted, you and I, the elite, have adopted to opt out of the public sector and make for our children access to private education and private health, etc., which has, of course, increased the inequalities in our society. But that's a model that one can try for. But as I said, that will require a wholesale change in governance and achieve a governance model as it is in Scandinavia or China or closer to home, Singapore, where the public sector plays a critical, important role and delivers the high quality of public service, whether it is in education, health, infrastructure, services, municipal, etc., etc. We need to think through this now very carefully. That otherwise we might have to live with growing inequalities, which might not be the most desirable things to do. So that's the other model. But again, going back to numbers, because we are much we are more used to talking about numbers. 6% is what I said is what we've grown at from 1990, and that I said is not going to be enough. And therefore, you have to jump to at least 8%, plus, going forward. And let me tell you, friends, here that 1990, the per capita income Chinese and us was the same, $370 for us, $346 for them. Them who had come out of cultural revolution, of a complete, complete sort of dismissal, complete sort of destruction of their entrepreneurial class, etc., etc. Between 1990 and now, having grown at 6%, we have reached 2,850, and they have reached 5 times our. They are now $15,000, and in PPP terms, they today have a larger share of the world economy than us. So a difference in why am I pointing this out to you? That a difference of 4% per annum, 6 and 10, which is what they achieve, can make that kind of a difference. Similarly, if we decide or if we can manage to grow not at 6 but 8%, maybe our aspiration of a high income economy, of a OECD membership can come about. But that 8%, that 2% extra is not going to be easy. But before I go into the challenges, let me sort of take a step back and say that we have the ability, we have had the talent, we have had the capability of doing something which no other country in the world has been able to do, in the last 70 years. And I repeat, no other country in probably the world history has been able to achieve what we have been able to achieve in the last 75 years, which is that we have achieved simultaneously our triple transition: political, economic, and social. Nobody gave us a chance to do that. Winston Churchill said that they will come apart in 10 years' time. Think about it, friends. Our constitutional, makers, our forefathers gave us the highest form of democracy to adopt. A republican democracy in a country with a literacy rate of just 20% or less, in a sense. They gave us, positive positive affirmation, sort of positive, the means of raising the people in a society, which was characterized by centuries of social stratification through our caste system, through our other things, and so on. But they said no, we'll have the positive, positive discrimination, and we'll achieve the social transition and the economic transition. As I said, in 1947, according to some figures, we were $150 per capita. According to others, we were $56 per capita. And today we have achieved at least 20x in economic terms. So we have achieved that economic transition. Our poverty rates are now finished. Actually, the worst form of poverty is actually finished if you look at any numbers. So we have achieved the economic transition to a very large extent. Now the transition awaits us to become a prosperous, to become a Viksit Bharat. But that's the next stage of it. But we should congratulate ourselves for having done what we have done. And then look at democracy. Look at our political transition. We have strengthened our political institutions. Look around us. All of them are autocracies, military dictatorships, one-party rule, etc. Democracy has not been safeguarded in the largest parts of the developing world, whether it is Latin America or Asia or Africa. We stand out as a beacon amongst all for having maintained our democracy and having seen so many transitions, and with some hiccups, of course, but nonetheless, we are there, and our institutions are robust. Our institutions are developing. So political transition has also been achieved, and social transition. Where else would you have a country where a Dalit woman becomes the chief minister of the largest state of the country on 3 occasions and completes her term. And that's what we've seen in our country, across our country, in different states. I'm saying all of this to sort of bring home the point that we have the ability, if we want, to go above 6% and to raise 8 or 10 or whatever we aspire for. We have to make up our minds, and then that is when we can. If we could have, thrown away the biggest colonial power in the world, once we made up our mind, led by the Mahatma, I'm sure we can do this also. So therefore, one shouldn't approach the challenges that I'm going to mention to you with any sense of diffidence. We should approach them with a sense of huge positive confidence that yes, this is what we can do, and we can make the 21st century an Indian century. Why? Because China is now beginning to flounder, and they will, as most middle income countries, upper middle income countries do, will be wonderful, will be quite surprising if they grew at above 4% or 3% or something like that. And if we can now achieve rates of growth which are double that of China in the next 25 years, ladies and gentlemen, the day will not be far away when we will be closing the gap that has now arisen, that has now emerged between them and us. So therefore, the 21st century can be and perhaps should be ours. But facing all of this is what I point out in my book, which is that the world is now in an unprecedented historical transition mode. Never ever again before has 6 transitions come together at the same time. And we write about them. Each one of them could actually take a book in itself, but nonetheless, we have the audacity to put them in one. And these 6 friends are: one, the decline of Pax Americana, so that America will no longer be the Kotwal of this world, maintaining law and order and making sure that everything goes according to a certain plan. Pax Americana, which lasted after the Second World War, and all the institutions that you've seen globally, the Bretton Woods, the WTO, the SCAP, and so on, they've all been under the sort of hegemony of the Americans and have been shaped according to what they desired to be shaped. When I was in the Asian Development Bank, it was amazing that the Asian Development Bank also had US enough shares to have it a vetoing power, and even in Asia. So that's what been the nature of the world, but that's now changing rapidly, and thanks to the new president in Washington, D.C., it might decline even more rapidly than what we had imagined so far. So that's that one transition. The second transition is the inexorable rise of Asia, which is that there has been a 250-year blip, between the 18th century to the 20th century, which saw the rise of the transatlantic powers, the European and North America. But that was all. That was the 250 years. Prior to that, it was Asia, which China and India themselves accounted for more than 50% of the world GDP. That's why they came looking for us. That's why Columbus, Vasco da Gama, people who sort of found the Silk Road, etc. They all came looking for us. And that's now beginning to happen again, which is that Asia is rising, and Asia will become the center of gravity, and which will call for a major change in our own orientation of how we look at the world, and rather than all our foreign service diplomats seeking transfers to the Western capitals, may want to now look at Asia and Africa as places to go, because that's tomorrow, and that's the second transition. The third transition that we talked about is the geo-economic transition. And by geo-economic transition, one meant simply that the institutions that had been set up after the Second World War have now become dysfunctional. They don't play the same role as they were meant to be. This includes the UN, of course. And unless the UN reforms, and unless the Security Council is reformed, and maybe they will never be, so you probably need a new set of geo-economic institutions, whether it's the WTO or the IMF or the World Bank, etc. China has taken some initiatives. BRICS have taken the initiative to set up the new development bank, and maybe you will require more of these as we go forward. And India's foreign policy would have to be tailored to those requirements. The fourth one is the rise of the South and the declining role of the OECD. They contribute today less than the South, combined South, to the growth, economic growth, the global economic growth. And that again has its own implications. I'll not get into details of that. The fifth and the sixth, I think, are perhaps more important than even the decline of Pax Americana, which is the fifth industrial revolution, which is the AI, and which is more powerful than all previous industrial technological revolutions that have taken place, including the steam and the and the internet or mass manufacturing, etc., electricity, etc. The technological change, the AI, which in the next 5 years promises to outstrip human intelligence, especially because of the advent of the quantum computing powers. And the sixth and the last is climate change, which is that today we have at best a 20-year window. The 1.5 degree centigrade levels are gone. We've passed them. The 2 degree centigrade is waiting to be crossed. And once that happens, we don't know what is in store for us. And that's a 20-year window that we today have, as everybody says. And the successive failure, or the failure of successive COP conferences, the COP30 being no exception, shows to me that the world, especially the developed economies, are not taking this seriously. It is important for us to take it seriously and not continue to be satisfied by saying that we have our own historical right to develop first and take care of the climate change later, as the advanced economies have done. Yes, that is how it should have been. That is how it would be fair. But the world, I'm not sure whether we are right in thinking that the world is a fair place. I'm not, I don't think so. India faces the challenge today of climate change, which will affect it enormously. Let me give you one example of, and climate change is one that I'll focus on and not on the other four because of the lack of time. There's something called the Asian brown cloud, which means that all the carbon in the atmosphere now comes down and settles on the snow peaks of the Himalayas, the third pole as it is called. And that results in greater retention of heat on the snow peaks, which has already resulted in a massive recession of our glaciers. They are receding 4 meters a year. And the Kedarnath, what happened to the Kedarnath glacier is a glaring example. You get glacier lakes, which then break their banks. And this phenomena is increasing in almost like an exponential manner. And once this happens, ladies and gentlemen, the perennial rivers, the mighty rivers that you've had in this country, which are all fed from the Himalayas, from the Hindu Kush to the eastern, northeastern borders, they will be threatened. And once they are threatened, we don't know what will happen to this ancient civilization, which has been a riverine civilization forever and ever, as far as we remember. That's one example. The second example that I'd like to speak to you about is that we know that sea levels are rising. We know that Bangladesh is a completely alluvial land, which has been created by the soils brought in from the Brahmaputra and the Ganges, to there. They import stones. They don't have stones. So imagine a few inches rise in sea levels and the impact of that on our neighbors in Bangladesh, on our neighbors in the Maldives, on our neighbors in Sri Lanka, and on our own coastal cities. What would happen to that? So friends, I'm saying this to you, I'm bringing this out to you, that whether or not the developed countries give us the finances, whether or not Europe bothers about its environment, or Donald Trump says that this is a hoax, we've got to take it seriously because of already what is happening in our subcontinent, in our country. Therefore, we have to be the country, maybe the first country in the world, who will have to develop and continue to grow at 8% per annum, but also achieve ecological security at the same time. It's not an easy task. It's a very difficult task, but we have to take up this challenge. And I'm sure that we are capable of it. And give you one example of why we think it's capable of it. Today, it's clear that no longer adaptation and mitigation are sufficient for preventing climate change and achieving ecological security. They are good, but they are not sufficient. What is required today is to remove carbon from the atmosphere and put it back in the soil. And that is what is the carbon sequestration. The need of the hour is large-scale carbon sequestration. And lo and behold, what is happening in our country for the last 10 years or so is that there is a growing movement of natural farming, which is zero chemical farming, which completely bans the use of any chemical, especially chemical fertilizers, in your agriculture. On Friday, the Prime Minister himself said, and I have been talking with him for the last 5 years when I was in NITI Aayog, about how to spread the natural farming in our country and how to make it viable, and because that is the way to achieve food security and ecological security at the same time. You can do it if you want, if you succeeded. And on Friday, I forget where he was probably, but he made the statement that today is the time to collect the scientific evidence for the promise of natural farming. And you know why we want to do that? Because in 1947, Institute of Soil Sciences in Bhopal, it tells us that our carbon content in our soil was 2.5%. 1.5% is required to keep our soil arable. And the latest figure that has come out of the agriculture ICRA is that, and Institute of Soil Sciences, that our national average of carbon content in the soil is 0.3%. At 0.3%, we are a non-arable land already, and therefore you require increasing quantities of chemical fertilizers to produce decreasing quantities of food grain. As a result of which, 1 kilogram of fertilizers in 1970 used to produce 12 kilograms of extra grains, and today the ratio is down to, I think, 4 or 5. Our soil is in the ICU. We have to prevent it. The Prime Minister said as much in his August 15th address last year. And we can do it if we adopt natural farming all over the world. Acharya Devbrat, the governor of Rajasthan, is doing whatever he can to propagate it. And that will become the largest carbon sequestration program in the world. And President Macron has said that he wants to ban it, and he will follow our lead if we succeed. But what does all this mean? Because what does all this mean? Is that no more will thinking, as usual will do at all. Think business as usual will just simply not work. We've got to think completely differently. And as Uttam had said earlier, I am of the firm belief that we cannot succeed in our challenging world today by following anybody's model at all. We have to think on our own feet, think on our own soil, rooted in our soil, and think differently, think innovatively, think in ways which nobody has ever thought before. And DPI is a great example of that, the digital public infrastructure. People now from the west to the east are now trying to emulate this. From Latin America to East Asia, and I've been witness to that. We can do this in other areas as well, in all other areas as well. Diksha, the use of AI for our multi-language, instructions all across the world, all across the country in your own mother tongue is another great example. The health stack is the third example, and there are others. But what we need to do is to create a mindset today, which will become the mindset for achieving the goals of 2047, friends. And that mindset, is, I can go on, but, and as you noticed, I'm aware of the fact that I've not touched on labor markets despite the codification of the labor codes. which has come about, because that's again, we have to think differently there too. How to reduce the informality, which which plagues us today, and the youth unemployment, which is about 17-18% and rising. All of this requires that we think innovatively, think anew, think differently, and the one necessary condition for that, is that all of us firmly believe that whatever we can do to contribute to our nation's growth and progress is our duty to be doing so. And that is what, and wherever we are and whatever we do, we can contribute meaningfully to the growth of this country. And that reminds me, friends, of a bhajan that I used to sing in my school, a modern school in New Delhi, which said, the first two lines of those were, Bharat hamara desh hai, और इसका ऋण हम पर बहुत, और इस ऋण के खातिर हम कुछ न कुछ कर जाएंगे. If we have that mindset, friends, we can achieve not just Viksit Bharat, but we can achieve a country which can be proud of itself and which can be emulated by others. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, sir, for that wide-angled and deeply grounded address. You reminded us how much India has achieved in just 75 years, socially, politically, and economically. Transitions of a scale and speed that no nation has ever managed. Your idea of gross national welfare offers a humane, forward-looking framework for the next phase of our growth. It reassures us that a fairer, more balanced future is definitely within reach. You also reminded us not to lose our sleep over the fact that the world is not always a fair place. What matters is how we show up with clarity, resilience, and of course, integrity. Your concern about the growing brown cloud over Asia is an urgent call to action. It pushes us to think not just about development, but also about accountability, sustainability that will define the quality of the life of our continent for the next generations. India's road to 2047, as you said, sir, will not be linear. It will demand agility, trust, and institutions that can adapt with confidence while staying steady enough to hold the country together, including the labor market and the concerns which we as a country are trying to resolve through the newly promulgated operated labor codes. Your call to think in parallel, not in sequence, speaks directly to our officers, sir, who work every day in ambiguity rather than certainty. Thank you for giving us a clear lens through which to view the future. And thank you also for your generous words about RGDE. Hearing from you that this forum is unique among public institutions gives us a great confidence. It strengthens our belief that conversation like this can be genuinely an influence on how we think, learn, and serve. Your reminder that Asia and Africa are the centers of tomorrow is a nudge to prepare thoughtfully, urgently, and with heart and soul as you recollected your modern days thoughts, sir. Thank you so much. And if you permit, sir, may I take a few questions from the audience, which have already posted lots of questions, but I'm constrained that I'll be able to take only a few given the constraint of time, sir.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, Anton.
Sir, thank you, sir. This is a first question from one of our Assistant Provident Fund Commissioners, Shri Akshay Wag. He is from Hubli in Karnataka, and he says, India's manufacturing share has been stuck around 17%. Yet the ambition is to reach 25% as we move towards Viksit Bharat. Given our current skill gaps across the labor force, how realistic is this shift? And what would it take to make manufacturing a primary driver of growth?
You want me to answer these questions one by one?
Well, sir, you can give it all at once as also.
No, let's take it sequentially. Yeah, that'll be better.
Sir.
to do justice to the questions. On manufacturing, the most important point is that it has to become the principal driver of growth as we go forward. If we want to generate the kind of employment that we need to generate, manufacturing would have to be the one to absorb our skills and our human resources. That's clear. Now, whether it's 25% or 23, that's the figure is not matter. The important question is why hasn't happened so far? And pardon my saying it, but with due respect to everybody, but it has not happened because since independence, we have not given our private entrepreneurs the respect and the credit that they deserve for having made this country a glorious country for centuries together. And all of us, I recommend all of us to read an amazing book called The Golden Road by William Dalrymple. I wish I was the one to write it, because it tells you that from 3th century BC to 12th century AD, India was the center of attention and gravity and of trade and so on, all because of what? Our private entrepreneurs. And I think, and that's the first condition I always put down today after having spent years in the government, is that we've got to change from being a regulatory state to a promotional state. That's the mantra for getting manufacturing right. If our entrepreneurs feel that the state is out there to help them resolve their daily problems, rather than to ask them questions on the basis of mistrust and to believe that every apple in the basket is a rotten apple, that will not work. And that's what has happened over the last 75 years, which is that because of some black sheep, the entire class has been painted black, and rules have been put there such that to try and prevent things of that kind. Now, some of it is happening already. The Prime Minister addressed it, I think, in last year or year before, the fact that there are 62,000 regulatory regulations and compliances that the private sector has to deal with. There were 1,200 completely infructuous laws from the colonial times that have now thankfully been set aside. Lots more needs to be done, and lots more needs to be done at the level of every state government, not pan-India, because every state in our country is like a country in itself. Imagine whole of Europe being run from Brussels. No. So this factorial fact of removing the regulatory compliance burden on our states, treating them with trust and with respect and helping them, must be now inculcated and actually driven into our public sector, so that the trust between the government and the business and the academia and the civil society comes together. Because without that, as you said yourself, we are not going to get manufacturing. Ease of doing business has been talked about a lot, but we now need to actually achieve it on the ground. And therefore, one must look at very carefully the book written recently by Sanjay Baru titled The Secession of the Successful, that those who are successful in India, their younger generations are now leaving India, manufacturers included. That all those issues will have to be tackled if we want to have our manufacturing sector grow at the rate at which it is required to grow. And as I said, it must grow if we want the jobs to be generated where people are and what are needed today to meet the exploding aspirations of our young population. I hope that answer suffices. I can get into the many more technical nitty-gritty, but that can be done for the next time.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. The second question is from Dr. Manish Ghan Bahadur from Akola. And he says that the labor codes have now been rolled out, including provisions for gig and platform workers. What are the biggest challenges and opportunities you think lies in building a universal, fiscally sustainable and inclusive social security system? May I reframe it, sir? So what he's trying to ask is now we are expanding the social security coverage to everyone, including the gig and platform workers.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And
what would be, sir?
so there, part answer was given by somebody whom I suppose all of you know very well, called Manish Sabarwal, the head of Team Leads India, who wrote long ago that the social security obligations should not be mandatory on the employee, but on the employer. And the employee should have the option of adopting it or not adopting it. And the employers should be, it should be made clear to the employer that they need to spread this to all the workers, which they have. Why am I saying that is because that is the only way to spread the coverage of what is called the formal sector, where social security exists and does not exist in the informal sector. So therefore, once you do that and once you give the right incentive to the employer, if for adopting this social security measures, that's the way to go forward. Today, as you know, there is and I've seen this in action. People say, we don't want the parsi wali tankha, we want the haath wali tankha, and that discourages people to join the formal sector. So I think once that barrier is removed, the social security network could be expanded to the entire country. And that perhaps is the only way forward.
Sri Rijwanuddin from Pidunas itself, sir, he asks, if you had to pick few initiatives, maybe one or two, that could help Indian institutions become globally competitive, what would they be?
I suppose by Indian institutions, he means Indian companies. Our political institutions, for example, the Parliament or the Supreme Court is globally competitive already, I'm sure he will agree. So on for companies to become globally competitive, the two measures at the moment I think are critical. One is on the public sector, which is to make, I'm repeating myself, make universal access to high quality education at all levels, available to the people of this country, which will convert the human resource into human capital, and which is the only way forward actually to take advantage of our demographic dividend, as they say. And that's the sort of public sector required condition for making it globally competitive, our Indian companies competitive. And for the second, which is the private sector, is that the abysmal record of the private sector in R&D should now improve finally. Our R&D expenditure in the country is, I think, 0.68% of the GDP. In Korea, it is 4.2. In China, it is about 3.1. In the US, it is about I think 2.8 or something like that. Or no, 3.8. Ours is 0.68. Of this, 80% is spent by the public sector agencies like the CSIR and the public sector enterprises. So basically, the private sector spends zero, close to zero, on R&D, and that has to change. And only if that changes. When I was the chief economist of CII at a national executive meeting, I asked everybody there as to who had done a product innovation in this country since independence. Ladies and gentlemen, there was no answer. And I challenge you to tell me if you know of a product innovation that has been done in India, like the Walkman or the, or the laser or whatever. That's the key. Innovation and R&D, and that will happen only when the industry starts working with the academia, with our higher research institutions. They fund all the institutions abroad, but not in the country. Time to do that. Like, for example, some have done, famous among them is the Tata, this Institute of Fundamental Research, etc. But they don't do the research themselves. Tisco is not famous for his result or Tata. Anyway, that answer is, I think, as it should be.
Thank you, sir. Personally, I am very proud of two of our Indian products, sir, UPI and Aadhaar.
They're
Aadhaar
not,
comes at a fraction
they're
of the
not
cost.
product, they are services. Sorry, and I mentioned them already
Okay,
in
okay, sir.
my lecture. I'm talking about products,
Okay, okay, sir.
like
Uh,
that.
Sir, Manoranjan Kumar from Indore, he asks that there has been a lot of talk on ease of doing business, which you also referred, sir. Do you think that the reforms are moving fast enough, or do we need a deeper simplification push?
We need a much deeper simplification push. And I think we could do with Elon Musk's Doge, as far as I'm concerned. A large number of departments exist without really a rationale for them. And I think we need, why me? The Prime Minister himself has said that the need to remove all these regulation and compliance burden. I think we should set a timeline and actually see it in practice that they actually go. So we need a deeper and a much more urgent simplification. And to sum it up, as I said, we need a state which is a promotional state and not a regulatory state in this country, in every state of this country.
Sir. Shri Ramesh Nair from Kerala says, can India realistically meet its 2047 ambitions without major administrative reforms in the bureaucracy and judiciary? And if you had to choose, what should be India's single highest priority between now and 2047?
Well, and he says it himself, Mr. Nair said it himself, because what we need is governance transformation. And, we need to, we've just been talking amongst a small group of us that the whole notion of the ruler and the ruled should now go. So that's a colonial hangover that still exists. And for that, what we are doing in the Pahle India Foundation, which I'm actually quite proud to say, is to trying out an experiment in a couple of states where we are talking about district-based development model, where we are trying to say that each district, which by the way in India is 3 million people, larger than some countries in the world, each district should have its own baseline estimates of the GDP, then use those baseline estimates to create targets for itself and KPIs for the administration and the other stakeholders. And at the district level, the four stakeholders, government, industry, academia, and civil society, should come together to then monitor these targets and their achievement, so that what is achieved then is what we call short-term accountability. Because long-term accountability to some extent is achieved by our election process. For the short-term accountability of our bureaucracy and of our industry and of our academia, it's a shame that our academic institutions, there are a large number of teachers who outsource their services, to people, and then go and do some other thing. I'm talking about academic because I'm one, so I know what the amazing failures are. But all of that can change if we do this at the district level and start that. That'll be a massive governance transformation that we are talking about. And I've been inspired into this by my experience of aspirational districts, a program that the Prime Minister started and told NITI Aayog to achieve it, and I was head of it for 3 years, 3.5 years. So that particular model of governance transformation, which will also achieve the elimination, the complete abolition of this ruler-ruled situation, I think is the key to India achieving its aspirations for 1947.
Thank you, sir. The last question, sir. You have well argued that India must progress on many fronts simultaneously. But with the administration working in silos with limited capacity and even uneven institutional strength, is simultaneous transformation realistic? And how do we avoid overwhelming institutions while still pursuing this ambition?
Well, working in silos, actually, a lot of it will be addressed if you adopted the district development model that I talked about, because the silos will break down, the capacities will be sort of shared and allocated according to what you need, etc., etc. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is that, pick up, bite what you can chew. So if you find the six completely, and one example of that is what our foreign minister once said, and what, anyway, foreign minister once said is that, for example, the best foreign policy for our country would be to focus on our domestic growth. So maybe forget foreign policy for a while if that becomes too much. Let's not attempt to be on the high table of global governance, when we are ourselves, we are trying to wrestle with our own domestic reforms and requirements. So, simple point being, bite what you can chew. Don't overbite, but also don't underestimate yourself. Because as I said, and I repeat myself, I know that this country is full of amazing talent, which only needs to be unleashed and brought forward. And for every one of us to believe that we can contribute to this country in a meaningful way and feel relevant. What happens very often is that a feeling of irrelevance sets in quite, at very young ages, and that is when we lose the game, lose the game. So those are the things that we need to do. And just back again to my school song, हम कुछ ना कुछ कर जाएंगे. If we do that, I think we'll do lots of. हम बहुत कुछ कर जाएंगे.
Thank you so much, sir. It has been such a pleasure listening to you, sir.
Thank you.
And it's time for me to say a formal vote of thanks. Thank you, sir, formally for graciously agreeing to address us, sir. And I know we had to wait a month, that also because of your ill health. But nevertheless, sir, today's session has been quite enriching. I would like to thank our Central PF Commissioner, Shri Ramesh Krishnamurthy Saab. I would like to thank Kumar Rohit Saab, the Director of the National Academy, who has been an enthusiastic supporter of learning in forums like this and bringing voices across the spectrum in the country and from abroad. I would like to thank my colleague Prashant Sharma and the entire team of RGDE to help us weave this program every month. And many thanks to all the colleagues who tune in regularly from across the country. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you in the next session and have a great evening. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir, once again.
Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.